Colorado was first in the nation to legalize marijuana.
Legalization is popular in Colorado. People don't want people to go to jail for smoking weed, but people say, this isn't the weed that I voted for.
We've allowed an industry to put products on the market and then tell the consumer to prove it's not safe.
I went into this thinking, why is this happening? I don't understand.
Spend one day with me in the ER, and if you can say what you've seen is cool, then tell me about it.
Colorado kind of jumped in before doing the research. They just looked at what they thought the financial gain would be. If you really want to do the numbers, we're losing money.
And our state leaders talk about how much money they're going to make, and they never talk about the societal losses. Some of the data that is out there is for every dollar generated, it costs about $4.50 to regulate. So it's already upside down.
I don't think tax revenue for marijuana goes to any medical costs.
No, it does not. Actual marijuana revenue is, on a number amount, may seem high, but out of the percentage of a state's budget is very minuscule. This is only less than 1% of the total budget. And a lot of that has gone into programs that help it look good in a public eye. So we're going to go support schools, we're going to give scholarships, but none of it actually goes to medical care costs.
When we voted to legalize it, 72% of the municipalities said we don't want it in our backyard. Only 28% said, okay, we voted on it, we're going to put it in our communities. The vast majority of the communities opt out.
Our county commissioner decided he would call this the Napa Valley of cannabis. So all of a sudden we had this huge influx of people who were incredibly needy, because not only did they bring their desire to live in, smoke, and use cannabis, they brought their medical issues, and they brought their social issues, and they brought their kids, and they didn't have housing, and they didn't have plans.
The community of Pueblo is, by and large, a guinea pig as far as marijuana goes, and I do think, and you look back over the course of time and realize it wasn't a good move.
You don't see the pot shops next to the governor's mansion. You see them in poor, vulnerable communities, just like tobacco and alcohol. It's a targeting of poor and vulnerable communities. The medical marijuana program is somewhat of a ruse.
Right now, there are approximately 300 medical cards for children aged 0 to 17. There are 4,000 medical cards for 18 to 20-year-olds.
One of the principles that this was founded on was that our kids wouldn't get or have access to cannabis. There's a school resource officer study that showed they're getting it from their parents or they're getting it from somebody who bought it legally over 50% of the time.
83% of the kids between 18 and 20 claim severe pain.
So the 18-year-old that is not old enough to get legal marijuana in Colorado can get his medical marijuana card without parental consent, and he may still be in high school. And so he can do something called looping, where you can go from store to store to store to store, get your 2 ounces of weed, and then become the school drug dealer.
They can buy twice as much product every day. It's cheaper. Then they become an access point to their peers as well.
And that happens a lot in the state of Colorado.
5-10 years ago, kids would come in saying they were using marijuana to help with their anxiety or depression, but really they just wanted to get high. And now when we see kids, they genuinely believe this is medicine. They believe that marijuana is good for them. They believe that whatever's bugging them, if they just use enough marijuana products, it will make them better.
We didn't realize they were getting a hold of high-potency THC as young as 15 through friends who had medical marijuana cards.
I believe that marijuana absolutely led to my son's death. Had he not begun using as a young kid, he wouldn't have had the desire to continue going to the harder and harder drugs.
I used to scoff and laugh when they said that marijuana was a gateway drug. I really did. I thought that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard, but it indeed is a gateway drug. It always led to something else.
I've seen hundreds and hundreds, probably about 1,000 kids by now, go through there. Every single one of them will tell you they started with weed because it was the easiest thing to get to. Every single one of them still struggles with anxiety, mental health issues. I've gone to 4 funerals for these kids, which has been heartbreaking.
Everybody minimized the pot, so to him it was not a big deal. My son passed when he was 18 years old.
Since legalization of marijuana, prescription opioid overdoses have gone up 90%. Fentanyl overdoses in Colorado have gone up 700%. Cocaine has gone up 200%. Methamphetamine has gone up over 100%. Heroin, interestingly, as cheap as available as it is on the decline, but still up about 15% since legalization. So all these substances play well in the sandbox. I think marijuana is probably the overseer of our drug problem.
When I used marijuana, it always led me to prison. It always led me to the next step in my drug use.
The link between opioid use and marijuana is very tight, and I think there's scientific evidence. The cannabinoid, the endocannabinoid and the opioid systems are very tightly related. The predominant predictor of adult opioid misuse is having used marijuana before the age of 18.
Contrary to what the marijuana industry wants you to believe, cannabis is addictive.
There's quite a significant withdrawal symptoms that I think we've underestimated. People can't sleep, they feel anxious, they feel achy. A lot of classic withdrawal symptoms when they stop using, and even when they try to stop, they can't.
Cannabis addiction in a rehab facility was laughable 10 years ago. No one went into rehab for cannabis, and now the rehab industry for cannabis is robust and unfortunate.
Cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, we see it at least every single day now, at least one every single day. It's very easily recognized by the scream vomiting, which we call scromiting. I can close my eyes, I can hear it rolling by me, and I can say that's a cannabis hyperemesis patient.
And in general, the only thing that successfully treats it is the cessation of cannabis. It's poorly understood what's causative. We do know there's a lot of cannabinoid receptors within the GI tract, and there's different theories about why that seems to lead to it. Typically, it's people who've used for long periods of time at higher potencies who seem to get cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. These people, if you can imagine, they look sick. They're screaming, they're grabbing their stomachs, they're vomiting uncontrollably, they're panicked, they're anxious, and so a lot of times they get a large workup in the emergency department as to what the cause is, which means they get laboratory studies drawn, they get CT scans, they get admitted, they get endoscopies. A recent study looked at the cost, somewhere in the realm of $76,000 per patient.
And if you allow one of those patients per the 25 ERs in the state of Colorado, that's about a $59 million price tag. And my colleagues in Colorado Springs, which is a somewhat conservative community, says they see about 2 to 3 patients that have cannabinoid hyperemesis per doctor per shift.
We're just translating that bills or charges to the public in the form of Medicaids. Almost no one admits or acknowledges the fact that it's cannabis. I've heard multiple times, it's not the pot, it's not the pot. And I think of all the patients I've had, only one person has said, no, maybe I should stop.
Another function of a commercial market has been an arms race in potency.
Heavy concentration of THC, it's a super industrial strength type of marijuana.
If we talk about marijuana that was prevalent, say in the 70s or 80s, we're talking 3, maybe 4% THC in the marijuana plant. If you walk into a dispensary down the road from my hospital, you'll regularly find marijuana flower products in the 20 to 25, 28% range. If you went into Starbucks in 1980 and they had this much caffeine that was analogous to a 4% joint, and then they now sold you that same cup of coffee that was jacked up to the 28% equivalent, it'd likely give you a heart attack.
You have to peek under the covers a little bit, because what our kids are using less of is good old flower weed. They're not smoking weed anymore. They're vaping, they're dabbing, and they're using edibles.
Just consider the latest report from the Colorado Department of Health. They surveyed the use of dabbing. It went from 4.3% of students in 2015 to over 20% in 2019.
There was a study done where if I give people IV THC at 0, so placebo, or 2.5 or 5 milligram doses, all of them had a dose-respondent effect to developing psychotic type symptoms, at least symptoms of paranoia.
But you have to say, like at the 2.5 or 5 milligrams, that's a super low dose these days. Because we're talking about dab, wax, and shatter, that if you get a gram of it, it could be 900 milligrams of THC or 800 milligrams. So you're talking about high potency now.
The evidence on marijuana is emerging and it's getting stronger and stronger, but we know that using any marijuana product can increase someone's risk of becoming psychotic 300 to 400%, and that's using relatively low potency marijuana products. And while we see the emergence of new high potency distillate products up to 80, 90, almost 100% THC, we see the impacts of the psychosis even so much more.
Sam Wong in Denver, who's a pediatrician emergency room physician, he saw a significant rise in adolescents presenting to the emergency department related to marijuana use. 70% were there for psychiatric reasons: depression, suicidality, psychosis, panic, suicide attempt, suicidal behavior. All those things are starting to impact the emergency departments across the state.
And these high potency products seem to be eminently more addictive. They seem to be greatly more impairing. And so the speed at which your normal high functioning teenager will turn into basically what we might have ascribed to as a crack addict 20 years ago is pretty fast.
I've had a kid that was at he was supposed to be on a football scholarship to a D1 school to play football. He had taken off from the camp, driven over 120 miles an hour in his car before the car finally broke down, and they brought him in. After about 2 weeks, they still couldn't get him to keep his clothes on. Again, the only thing positive was a urine drug screen positive for cannabis.
I treated a young man last month who came in. He had no idea where he was. He had no idea what the date was. He was wandering around naked.
One kid in particular came in after he was swinging metal rods in the middle of traffic at cars. He'd been tased twice by the police. Came in just screaming at the top of his lungs. You know, the only thing that came positive on his drug screen was cannabis out of the whole thing. And eventually he did say that, yeah, he had used some waxes. In the field, they had given him some pretty heavy tranquilizers. So they'd given him 5 milligrams of Haldol, 50 milligrams of Benadryl, 2 milligrams of Ativan, Versed, and had no effect. We actually gave him an additional 10 milligrams of Versed, which normally I'd be looking at putting a breathing tube. That's what I was anticipating doing, and that just got him to a point to be calm enough to actually talk with me.
Marijuana is the #1 substance found in completed teen suicide in Colorado. And that, interestingly, that number flipped coincidentally when we legalized in 2012, when we voted on it. It used to be alcohol. 2012, it became marijuana when kids are killing themselves in Colorado. And it's gone up every year since then. It's the #1 substance found when kids kill themselves here.
And there's not a lot that we can do with these kids. And so they will often sit in the emergency room for days, sometimes weeks, awaiting placement.
It's not that uncommon. And that's what really turned me into there's a problem here. There is something that we have not picked up on.
Most of our early research would suggest that these people had a genetic risk that predisposed them to psychosis. My clinical experience would say that a lot of these folks, if they avoided THC products, may never become psychotic, but once they've awoken these genes, then they may be dealing with a lifelong illness similar to or the same as schizophrenia.
I think there's been a huge debate of it may not be the cannabis that's doing that, though. Maybe they had underlying schizophrenia and the cannabis just unmasked it. There's actually quite a bit of research that's been gone into that. So there's been a number of epidemiological studies that show that people who use cannabis are much more likely to develop psychosis and schizophrenia. Furthermore, there are functional MRI studies that I can see changes on people's brains in the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex, and all of those areas are involved in your processing of emotion, memories, and then how you process through those emotion and memories in that prefrontal cortex. So there actually are changes to people's brains that happen functionally.
So when you have marijuana that will set these episodes off, then it predisposes people to lifetime poor functioning, institutionalization in many cases, and bad outcomes.
And so I think the idea that whether or not cannabis is actually causative of psychosis, I am more and more convinced that that's been answered. I think cannabis is causative of psychosis. And at some point, that psychosis may not be reversible, and these people may develop full forms, at least forms of schizophrenia. We see this almost every single day that we work, and I think it's been way undersold, the effects that this is actually going to have.
The reality of a commercialized market where it costs $1 million to open up a store, is they are trying to build lifelong customers. And what we ended up with is marijuana in brownies and marijuana in gummy bears and marijuana in cereal.
I was shocked at the number of products that were being sold in Colorado dispensaries, and some colleagues of mine and I were just decided we should get the word out. And so I would initially do some talks to family medicine doctors and pediatricians and primary care docs, and the response was always the same. They couldn't believe that you could buy candies that were significant THC products. You couldn't believe that you could get THC-soaked tampons or vaporizing devices that look like an albuterol inhaler.
Many of them, they're not distinguishable that they have a psychoactive drug in them. They're not distinguishable that if a child is sucking on a lollipop in a classroom, that it's not just an after-lunch treat, that it's actually a THC-infused piece of candy.
We have said that with tobacco, putting flavors in tobacco appeals to kids. Well, what happens when you put flavors and colors and pretty shapes and you put marijuana in food that kids want to eat? We see that as a problem.
Everybody on both sides of the debate are going to say, well, we don't want kids using. Well, I think an addiction for profit industry does want kids using. They want lifelong customers.
I went into this thinking, why is this happening? I don't understand. I'm not political at all. I don't understand, but I've since learned that an industry can basically pay to have lobbyists that will go and sit at the Capitol and sit and meet consistently with legislators and kind of push an agenda.
There were 75 lobbyists at the Capitol, and only one lobbyist retained by us to represent kids. So these lawmakers are hearing day in and day out from this industry.
The industry has understood politics very well, and they really know how to market. So currently, there's a huge push in our world that people don't like taking pills. I hear that all the time. I don't like taking pills. Pills are harmful to me. And I think that's been pushed off of the opiate epidemic. Well, the cannabis industry understood that, and they brought in immediately, well, we have an all-natural product. We have a plant. You don't have to take a pill. It didn't matter that it wasn't safe. It didn't matter that there was any studies about it. It didn't matter that aspirin comes from willow bark. Digoxin comes from foxglove. These are all plants. That cocaine also comes from a plant. So does opium. They pushed really hard, this is natural, this is not a pill, and kind of fed off of the current public sentiment that I don't like taking pills.
Marijuana has failed every single metric as it relates to public health. If somebody can provide me the data showing that our kids are using less, our drug overdoses are less, we're using less hospital utilization, we see less people getting in car crashes related to marijuana, send me the data. I have yet to see it. It doesn't exist.
I have spoken to politicians in Portugal, I spoke to the Parliament in Australia, and I have been to numerous Senate hearings and testified in front of numerous Senates across the country. I issue the same invitation. For every politician that thinks it's cool to legalize, come spend a day with me in the ER. It's my invitation, it's my public invitation. Spend one day with me in the ER, and at the end of my 10 to 12 hour shift, if you can say what you've seen with regards to drug abuse and use is cool, then tell me about it. Tell me that you still think it's a good idea.
We've allowed an industry to put products on the market and then tell the consumer to prove it's not safe, instead of our regulators telling the industry, you must prove it's safe before you can put it on the market.
I mean, you can't help but open up the internet and see the thousands of cures that are presented that are unsubstantiated by the cannabis industry, and then people are reading this and they're buying it. So education is a big part of it.
This can't come from the industry. This education needs to come from the physician community, and our legislators are going to have to listen and actually look at the real science. And then we need to take that data, and that needs to be put in to real education.
As you can guess, with a multi-billion-dollar industry, the cannabis industry is fighting this tooth and nail. But we would suggest that until we can definitively prove what is safe for public consumption, that there needs to be a stay and a cap on how high of a THC potency you can have in a product.
Voters tasked the legislature with overseeing a well-regulated industry, including the part of the industry that treats this substance as a medicine.
I think everyone would agree that these products are not designed for middle and high school students. And we should all be deeply concerned at the rate that they're getting their hands on these products and the impact that they're having on our kids and our families across the state of Colorado.
1317 will make Colorado the first state to really dive in and research the impacts of high-potency marijuana on the developing brain.
HB 1317 is a well-crafted bill that will move our regulations towards treating medical marijuana as any other medicine.
It is my conviction that as we finish this process, Colorado will be held up as a model by other states as a leader in the appropriate marijuana regulation.